seconds. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're going to have some really robust conversation around still a hot topic, which is the appraisal process and what's going on. My name is Gita Cartwright. I am the Senior Manager. I look after the broker channel nationally. I'm joined by Laura Forrester, who is our Director of Marketing. She'll be in charge of putting stuff in the chat, looking at your questions. Should you have any technical difficulties, please reach out and she will take very good care of you. And of course, the star of our show, Barend Pols. He is our Senior Manager for Appraisal Quality and Appraiser Relations nationally. Very busy guy, a lot on his plate, and we're really appreciative that you can join us today, Barend, so welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining our webinar.
Yes, thank you all for joining us. So thank you for those of you that had sent us some questions ahead of time. We know there are some burning questions out there. We're going to keep this super casual. Barend and I do this often where we kind of get together, we talk through some questions that we hear from our broker partners. We'll go through them, some of the ones we've already received, and then please use the chat function, send to panelists and hosts. That way, Laura, Barend, and myself can see your questions. Don't worry about anything to do with, grammar or spelling. No judgment here. Just get your questions in. We are only chatting for 30 minutes, so we want to get through a lot of content and make sure we get to your questions. I do want to quickly say that we do have some other webinars coming up next week. A few folks have reached out asking about accredited webinars. So we've got one next week. I believe it's on the 25th. It's Thursday. It's accredited at 1 p.m. Eastern time. Please sign into the portal and you'll be able to see which webinars we have coming up. Okay, awesome. I'll try to remind you at the very end as well. Let's get started, Barend. Interesting, when we started talking about doing this presentation together, it was kind of to chat about what had happened in the past, that spring market. But things really haven't slowed down in the same respect that we thought it might be. So it's kind of a preparation, everybody, for what we might expect in the spring, and maybe answer some of your questions as to kind of what happened over the last, 8 to 10 months. So Barend, what I want to start with, the first question that came in was, why do appraisals in some areas or some markets take longer than others?
That's a great question, and it comes to supply and demand of appraisers. So in the GTA, we have so many appraisers that we work with. Our turn times in urban areas are much better than in rural areas. I just wanted to highlight an example. We use a firm in Northern Ontario, and his turn times are a little bit longer, but he says, I will always tell you the date that I can deliver on. And the way that they run their firm is they cover about a 700-kilometer radius around the city that they operate out of. So their appraisers will be on the road for 4 to 5 to 6 days viewing properties. So they're not going to drive 600 kilometers and then drive back to the office and write one report. So they're going to do a tour. They're going to do a loop of all the areas that they cover. And then when they get back to their home office, then they will write up the reports. So it's really important in these types of areas that, if you look for the date that the appraiser has said that he or she can deliver the report, and if it's not what you need, if you really do need it sooner, then reach out to RPS, and we will do our best to try to find an appraiser and or a firm that can do it quicker. But in certain markets, we just don't have the appraisers that we have in, say, the GTA or the Greater Vancouver area.
Absolutely, and it just sort of on a side note, it brings up some other sort of challenges that we have, and where there might be a misconception where brokers think that appraisers are maybe for the most part sitting at their desk doing the research. Well, that's a really big part of what they do. There's an equal amount of time that's spent away. So us being able to access them quickly and call them quickly, it's tougher, correct? Because they're not necessarily sitting at the desk being able to have those conversations with us if we need to get a hold of them.
Exactly. So, that was one extreme example, but when we deal with other, talking to an appraiser in Nova Scotia, and they're like, I can get this done at 8 or 9 o'clock tonight. And
Mm.
like, I'm on the road. I left my house at 8 a.m. I'm going to see these 6 properties. And then when I get back to my office, then I'm going to start writing reports until 2 or 3 in the morning. So that's sometimes why when we get a request, I really need this report by 4 o'clock, or I really need it by 5 o'clock. They're not even in their office at that time. They're on the road viewing properties.
Absolutely. So you mentioned something regarding providing us with the condition of financing. So whenever you order an appraisal, guys, it asks you, when do you need this report by? And I know that we get a little pushback saying, well, why did the appraiser pick that up if they weren't going to be able to meet that turnaround time? You need to remember that unfortunately, the integrity of that data is compromised a little bit because everybody wants the report tomorrow as quickly as possible. So the appraisers, to be honest, and I really can't blame them, they kind of stopped looking at that unless it was a purchase transaction, because they were kind of like, well, I don't think they need it in 2 days. I'm pretty sure that's not the case. So this is my turnaround time. So like Barend was saying, if there is some urgency because of, there could be any reasons. We know we're the last stop pretty much in your mortgage process, but please let us know if it is a hard stop, if there is some condition of financing, if there's some urgency here and you've got that date in there, please let us know, because we really need to have that conversation with the appraisers, correct? To make sure they know.
And
Yeah.
and the sooner the better that we know, Gita, if we know that there is a tight closing, the more, or the sooner that we know, the better RPS can then try to find an appraiser to accommodate. It's the ones that we get a call, in the afternoon, and we're told that they need the report by 9 o'clock the next day. We have been able to perform miracles, but it just makes it very, very difficult. And to be frank, it can make it more expensive too.
Yeah, agreed. So be cognizant of that too, right? Because appraisal costs are I think we all feel it. They're going up, and that's a whole other conversation. And we'll get to that, I think, if we've got some time. But I do want to digress really quickly. I'm going to throw you off a little bit, Barend, because we talk a lot about, I've already done it to Barend already today. So but this is when we talk about supply and demand with our appraiser network, we do have a shortage of appraisers or people that are willing to enter that industry. So the succession of this profession is a little bit at risk as well. So that might also play into some of the markets and how we have availability and all that stuff.
Exactly. So the average age of a residential appraiser in Canada is about 57.
Mm.
So, it's not a dying industry, but because we also process a lot of applications for firms where they're adding new appraisers. It's just we are seeing appraisers leaving the industry and retiring as well.
Right. And I've seen in the last market, and some of your folks that are on the call today, if you are in remote or rural areas, if an appraiser books themselves off, for example, vacation, they just want to take some time off. If someone retires, that really shrinks the availability, and sometimes it puts a lot of pressure on being able to meet those turnaround times. So there's so much more at play when it comes to this. So I'm glad we had a chance, and that was a great question. And I think something that definitely folks want to know about in terms of where they're located. We're always happy to have those conversations. We can't always give you a turnaround time. I get that a lot. Well, what's the turnaround time going to be? It's tough until we actually have a live deal and we can have those conversations with the appraisers and really see what availability is. So we can have those conversations. And certainly we probably can tell you some of the harder markets where you can expect delays. So let's have open dialogue for sure. So what I want to do, Barend, I want to go to question number 2. And this one is a pressing point. It's happening a lot more. It's basically regarding when we need to do a letter or a lender redirect. So I'm going to read you the question. When I'm moving a report from one lender to another, why do we sometimes need a release letter? Why is there a fee for this? Isn't the appraiser simply changing the name on the cover page?
Okay. So there's two.
Loaded question.
Yeah. So there's two main appraisal associations outside of Quebec. Quebec has a third that's unique to them. And each association deals with lender redirects differently. But the one thing that they do have in common is we do need a release letter from the first lender stating that they're not going to use the report for lending purposes. So we do need that. Now, with the Appraisal Institute of Canada, they do what's called a letter of reliance. They are not allowed to change their original report. So they cannot say, okay, this was done for TD and now I need it done for National Bank. They can't just simply open up the report and change the name. So they do what's called a letter of reliance, and basically states that the new lender can use their original report for lending purposes. But again, I need to stress the original report, the name on that report, the lender, cannot be changed.
Okay. And very good point too, when it comes to clarifying that, because it isn't just really something very simple for the appraisers to do. And I guess the best way we can think about it, because there is a fee, correct, Barend? I mean, there's a fee for this. And
Yes.
every time an appraiser has to stop what they're doing, it's much like your business, guys. When you're in the middle of a file and you have other things that you have to do, that time that you're being pulled away from different parts of your business, that's costly. So the appraiser, and I get it, like your clients are refinancing, so there's lots of payments and there's a lot of things that they have to pay for. I understand you don't want to have yet another payment, but remembering that these folks are working as well, and every time they have to move themselves off of priority files in order to do something like a lender redirect, there is a cost to do that. It's the cost of their time. It's the background that has to happen. It's us at RPS that has to do the manual processes of helping you get in touch with your lender to get the release. There's a lot of things that go on that contribute to that payment.
Exactly. And then I just want to highlight the process for the second appraisal association. They're called Scenaria. And so when a lender redirect comes in and it was completed by a Scenaria appraiser, they do consider this a brand new assignment. So that's why with a Scenaria appraiser, you are going to get a brand new report that will be directed to the new lender, and it will follow the new lender's terms of reference. So they will have to make some modifications. So they're not going to change the original report. They're going to do a brand new report.
Right. Yeah. So again, time spent.
Yes.
Making sure that that's been done.
And so just to let you know that the majority of the appraisers in Canada are members of the Appraisal Institute of Canada. So that's why you're going to see letters of reliance more than you're going to see a brand new report.
Right. And that's a good point, because we get a lot of not pushback, but questioning in terms of this letter of reliance. And again, folks, that's why some are processed differently than others. We'll help you with that. We're not expecting you to know what accreditation these appraisers have. You know, certainly that's not something that we're going to ask of you, but we will let you know. So based on the appraiser that did this report, these are the requirements. We'll help you as much as we can. But you need to know that there could be some differences. So one file may not be exactly the same as another file. And what I do want to add to this too, sorry, but I don't know if you were going to say anything, but please be cognizant of the fact that every lender also has their own list of approved appraisers. So while you might have had this appraisal done for lender A, when we move it to lender B, there's the chance that this lender doesn't accept appraiser A. And I know that we do get a lot of questioning about, well, why don't you ensure that all appraisers are on every list? First of all, logistically, that would be an absolute nightmare. And really, each lender has their own risk rules. It's not necessary that appraiser A is, we don't like that appraiser. It could simply be the method of the appraisal or what they're looking to do. It's more in depth, for example, and they have partners that they've been working with. So just be cognizant of that, that we do need to also make sure that both the appraiser is on both lenders' list of approved appraisers. Okay, sorry, do you have anything to add on that, Barend? I felt like I cut you off there.
No, I think we're good on that topic.
Okay, perfect. I just want to pause for a second. I think Laura sent, there's some other questions that are come in from the group, so I'll take a pause from the ones that we have listed here, Barend.
Okay.
Oh, are there rules around when an appraiser can or can't redirect a report?
So that is what I wanted to state. So each association has their set of standards, and the Appraisal Institute of Canada, again, the larger of the two groups, they don't have anything in their standards that mandates their appraisers to do a letter of reliance. And we do have a few firms in our network, and we've tried to make sure that our internal broker team is aware of them, that refuse to do them. And there's nothing we can do to force them to do a letter of reliance. So we try to, when we set up a new firm, that is one of the services that we ask them to provide a fee for. And, if they have provided us a fee, then we go back and question them. If this is not a service that you're willing to provide, then why did you give us a fee for this service? So we do still try to advocate to try to convince them a little bit, to nudge them to do this, but at the end of the day, they can refuse.
Correct. And I mean, that's something that thankfully we don't run into often, but it happens. There are other times too, guys, where, maybe you've had this report sitting for a few months. The appraiser's not going to do a lender redirect if it's too stale, right? So
Yes.
if it's too, that's not going to happen. Other things I think about too, Barend, are, and I just jotted them down, sometimes you need new information. So I'm moving it from lender A to lender B, and I need you to add this to it.
Mhm.
Well, remembering we're not changing the composition of the first report.
Mhm.
So when we're moving it, it's got to be as is. It's apples to apples. If you need to add something, if we're changing the report in any way, I want you to look at new comparables, or I need an update, or I need, maybe it's you need market rents now. You've realized you need market rents. This really changes the game a little bit, because now you're asking the appraiser to do not just the report, but now you're adding stuff to it. So, expect maybe higher fees, maybe a longer turnaround time. Those are things that could affect that as well.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks for that question. It was fantastic. I'm going to move on to some of the questions that we had sent to us already, Barend, and then I'll keep checking the chat line, guys. So please don't hesitate to throw it in there. I would say, so the next question that we run into, Barend, is regarding the percentage that a property is complete. And this, I have a lot of conversations around this. So I'm going to read you the question. The appraiser went out to the property before it was 97 or 98% complete. Shouldn't they be aware of the percentage complete before they go out and do the inspection?
So I've been giving this one even more thought today, and I'm going to say, so appraisers are going to say that it's brokers' responsibilities. Brokers are going to say that it's appraisers' responsibility, and I'm going to say it's a shared responsibility. Everyone needs to take a bit of ownership in this. Is, from a broker perspective, asking the applicant, the right questions, is this in the house? Has this been built? Do you have a driveway? Is the brick on the house? Trying to gauge yourself from asking questions of your applicant where you think it is, because we try to ask the brokers not to order the appraisal until they're pretty sure that we're at 97 or 98% complete. But then the responsibility does shift to the appraiser to call the builder and ask them, what percentage are we at with this property? And I did have a conversation just last week with an appraiser, and he gave me an example of when they went, it was 67% complete. When he called the builder said, sure, we're ready.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Right.
they went and it's not. Or he gave another example where he called the site supervisor and he said, listen, I'm overseeing 200 homes. I don't know where your specific home is. And so,
Mm-hmm.
so then the appraiser needs to make a decision. Do they go back to the call center and say, you know, can you try to get the broker to get us more information? Or do they take a chance and go out and view the property to see themselves what percentage complete it's at? And if it's not at the 97 or the 98, then they'll have a good idea at least, okay, this is what I saw. I'm going to estimate the percentage complete here, kind of talk to the builder, you know, figure out the schedule of the rest of the build. And then the appraiser can come back and say, you know, I recommend that I go back in 2 weeks and we should be at the percentage complete. And then unfortunately, when we were talking about fees, that's going to incur another fee because the appraiser has to go back to the property again to view it.
Agreed. And I think, you know, and I know this is the cost of doing business for RPS as well, because sometimes these two lines get a little blurred, right? The broker did provide us with some information. The appraiser did call and was told erroneous information from the builder. And look, folks, we will cover that. We cover those fees, but we're not a nonprofit organization. So what we don't want to see is this kind of, you know, these communication gaps. So as much as you guys can do to help that, and as much as we can coach our appraisers to also have good conversations, and I know, Barend, you have those conversations often where you're saying, listen, perhaps a few more questions could have been asked, because now, you know, like the example where the report came in at 67%. Well, it's not useless, but they can't use the lender's not accepting it.
No, they
so
can't.
we've created this report for a lender that will not accept it until it's 97 or 98% complete. In light of the amount of, you know, the government really wants to ensure that supply over the next few years is not an issue. We have a lot of building that's going to be happening or anticipated to be happening. So you're going to probably be running into a lot more new builds, whether it's your client building or they're in a subdivision. And I know it's one more phone call, but making sure that when you have that contact, either the realtor or that building supervisor or the salesperson, to say, listen, if you don't know, please be honest with my appraiser, because when they call, this is not only going to delay my file and potentially, you know, put some stress on my closing, but it's also going to cost my client more money. And we're in the middle of a purchase here, and we don't have a bunch of money to be throwing around in excess. So we really need to have more than just those notes, guys, in the file. 97 or 98% complete. We need a little bit more from you in terms of, you know, making sure that request comes in as close to completion as possible. And then we'll do our part, like you said, Barend, to have a good conversation with our appraiser network.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, that's terrific. Thank you. What we do have a few more minutes. I don't see any other questions. Laura, if you see any, please forward them on. I haven't been able to really look at the Q&A just based on my layout, sorry. But I will go to the next question, Barend, and then if there are any wrap-up questions, we'll get to those as well, guys. This one is another hot topic, Barend, especially in a heated market,
Yes.
a multiple offer market. The question is, I want to appeal the value of my report. What is the best way to do that, and is it even worth it?
So let's start with, is it worth it? So we track statistics on this, and approximately 30% of value appeals do result in a value change. So it's not impossible, but it is at about 30%. And if you're going to launch a value appeal, you know, just make sure that you have additional information that you can provide the appraiser. You know, was there comparables that you know of that sold and you're wondering why the appraiser did not consider them? You know, make sure that you have a few comparables that the appraiser can look at. They can't be active listings. They cannot consider anything that's an active listing. It has to be something that has sold. And the other thing is, you know, put together maybe 2 or 3 comparables. You know, where the appraisers kind of get angry is, I've seen it where, sorry, just gonna get some water. a list of 10.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you talked earlier about every time they have to stop on a new assignment and go back and look at an old assignment, they're losing time and they're losing money. And so they don't mind looking at, you know, 2 or 3 comparables, and they'll give a written reason of, if they don't feel that they are good comparables, they will say why. And if they do feel that, hey, maybe I could have considered this comparable, then they will ask us to reopen the report. They will add the new comparable and adjust the value accordingly.
Absolutely. And you mentioned something about making sure that they are not live or listings that are on the go right now. We get a lot of that. Well, on the street, you know, it's we can't do that. We can't use those. My addition to what Barend is saying is take the emotion out of it if you can, because remember, these appraisers are looking a lot at the factual side as well. They're looking at square footage and rooms and things like that. You know, they're trying to find the best 3 comparables that match your property. So try to keep it apples to apples if you can. I know the emotion gets into it. Well, you know, those are horrible. And, you know, again, we're not appraisers, guys, and it's not an easy gig. I'll tell you that. So 2 to 3, ask your realtor partners. It's a great way to have some conversation around, can you help me out? I'm trying to have a value appeal. We absolutely support it. Let's just make sure that we do that in as respectful a way as we can with our appraisers. The last
I just wanted to add, you know, remember, the appraisers are there to help you close your deals. They're not there to kill your deals. They want to help. They want to support, you know, the mortgage industry. That's what they're there for. And but they just have to use their judgment. They have to, you know, lenders have various rules as well. You know, they want comparables that have closed in the last 90 days. They don't want dated comparables. They want them in the same subdivision. They don't want them too far away. You know, so the lenders have all kinds of rules as well, saying, you know, the comparable must be within 5 kilometers of the subject. And if you're going outside of that, you have to give a detailed explanation of why you're going against our underwriting rules.
Agreed, and that's a really good point. And I think that we do have to really give our appraisers some credit, because they do, much like yourselves, folks, they have to know about all the different lenders as well. They have to take all those things into consideration. It's a lot to digest. It's a lot to have on your plate. They do a fantastic job, and again, they don't want the appraisal business to dry up. This is their livelihood too. So if they want your deal to come to fruition just as much as everybody, but of course they have to weigh the risks of, you know, making sure that they are using the best data that they possibly can. I will also say that I understand from a sales perspective, having to sell that decline, really, or the fact that the value did not come in. And that's where really good information from the appraiser to say, this is why I chose comparable number 1, and I couldn't use the one that you sent us. We're happy to help you with that information, because I get it. I need to know the why behind the decision. So please don't hesitate. I know we're right on time, but there's one more quick question. Barend, if I could get, I don't want to leave it out. Does the other lender have to give the okay for the transfer to another lender?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
That is part of both appraisal associations standards. That's one thing that they absolutely have in common. They must have a release letter from the first lender stating that they are not going to be using this for lending purposes, and that the lender B may use the report.
Right. And I mean, think about it from this perspective, guys. They don't want this report floating around all over the place for multiple uses. There has to be some structure to this. There's audit, there's all sorts of, you know, eyeballs that are on these transactions. So it's not to create pain or misery for you. And the appraisers certainly don't want to slow down any of their processes either. But, you know, you can help us. You can help us by having those conversations as well, or the lender, you know, you can have that input to say, we really need to get that release when you do have to move. We're at our time. I don't see any further questions. We did have a few more that came in, folks. I think this is great content. It's clearly pressing issues, and there's a lot of folks that have questions about this. Maybe we could do another one, Barend, if I could steal you away.
Sure, but can we just address, if we have a few minutes,
Yeah.
one very unique situation that's been brought about by COVID. So
Sure.
we get questions, why are some appraisers going into homes and why are some appraisers
Great point.
not going into homes? So again, both associations encourage their appraisers to follow the rules in the various health districts that they work within.
Right.
Some appraisers do feel comfortable. A lot of the rural appraisers feel comfortable because there's so low COVID cases in their area. They were doing the standard full appraisal all the way along. They never, but urban appraisers where you have more COVID cases, they are doing what's called the full modified appraisal, where
Right.
they're going to go to the property, they're going to take the exterior pictures, they're going to do the measurements, but it is up to the applicant to provide the interior photos. And you know, the appraisers have to weigh the health risks and the liability, because they would actually prefer, if they could, go into the home, because you know, is an applicant really going to take a picture of a possible deficiency and send it to the appraiser? So the appraisers are taking a bit of a risk as well during this unique market. But as COVID subsides over time, keep your fingers crossed, we'll see the market go back to, you know, the standard full appraisal.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we will have the opportunity to have some modified fulls, some of your challenged areas, folks, right? Like perhaps it's rural, maybe. I don't think it'll go away, but you're right. Appraisers want to put their eyeballs on this stuff because they're signing off on this report. Also, keep in mind, there are some lenders out there, it is mandatory that the appraiser go in. Please keep in mind that if that is a requirement of your lender, we do have to make sure we communicate that with the appraiser,
Yes.
make sure they feel comfortable, make sure that we can find somebody that can do that. So in the notes section, please let us know. We will need to make sure that we connect with an appraiser that has the comfort
Right.
to actually go in and do those visits.
And we also find that with elderly applicants, where they're not tech savvy. They, you know, so we have had orders come in where it says, my applicants are elderly. Can you please try to find an appraiser willing to do the interior inspection? And I'd say 99% of the time we're successful finding a firm to do that. But again, at the end of the day, we can't force them to do the interior during COVID.
Right. And that's a great point. I mean, I think there's some flexibility, but we also have to be cognizant of people's comfort level. We're not out of the woods yet. Hopefully soon, like you said, fingers crossed, Barend. But let's, I think we just need to be respectful of folks and their comfort levels and what needs to get done, and know that we'll work with you to see if we can make sure that we can get done what needs to get done. I want to thank you, Barend. Honestly, every time we do this, I learn something. I know the folks that have joined us today have learned something. Thank you all for your questions. We really appreciate it. I think we need to do this again.
Absolutely.
And please don't hesitate to send questions in. These are things that, we do talk about as an organization. We want to equip you and arm you with the best info and for the best success when you run into these, like we had last spring, pretty much unprecedented. But we want to make sure that we continue to give you updates and give you tips and tricks on how to be the best that you guys can be. Thank you so much for joining us. Laura, thank you for your help on the chat line. Barend, again, thank you. I know how busy you are. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome. I enjoy this.
Yeah, me too. I get to see your face for a whole half an hour. It's nice. And thank you again, everyone that joined. We really appreciate it. Again, check our portal. There are some other webinars that are coming up next week. We hope to see you there as well. Take care and stay safe, everybody.
And thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you.